What's cracking, big dogs? Welcome back. Woo! I don't think cracking is my voice right now. Welcome back to the HQ. It's your man's Nicholas. Big dogs gotta eat. BDGE Fantasy Football. We are officially halfway through the fantasy football season. Week 8 is in the books. Goddamn, Jersey voice. We have another half of the season left, people. The season is far from over. If you are in 8th place, 10th place, you're probably only 2 or 3 games out of your playoffs. There's plenty of time. Anything that's happened in the first half can equally flip itself around. If you went 2-5 or 2-6, you could easily go 6-2 on the back end. You just have to make some good moves, which is why you come and see your mans every Tuesday to check out the top waiver wire pickups for the week. This will be focused on week 9, of course. Before we get into the video though, big announcement. We are almost in 2019, and 2019 is gonna be the year of investment. I'm talking about investing in yourself, investing in your health, wealth, happiness, pursuit of trappiness, all the above. What I'm talking about is my investment back into my business, my brand, my YouTube channel. With that being said, I will be opening up positions for BDGE content creators. I am going to be adding people to the team that want to produce content for the YouTube channel. So this will be video content. This will not be blogging. It will probably not be podcast focused, although that might be later in the future. I want to bring on, whether it's 1 or 7, it doesn't matter. The quantity is not my concern. The quality is what I'm looking for. I want to bring on a few different personalities onto the channel that are going to cover a wide variety of interests, or depending on whatever it is you are interested in. So if this pertains to you, listen up. I want to bring a few people onto the team that are going to be covering fantasy sports for the most part. I'm talking about fantasy baseball, fantasy basketball, fantasy soccer, fantasy NASCAR, whatever it is, any fantasy sport you are welcome to apply for. I'm talking about like fantasy bachelor. I'm trying to be ahead of the curve here, big dog, man. I want to put this brand on, and I think if we can come out with consistent quality content year round that focuses on personality-driven content and big facts only, we will rise. Like Gary Vee always says, man, no matter how much coffee you pour into the cup, the cream rises to the top, my friends. And that is what we want to be here at Big Dogs. And now you don't have to have any experience in creating video content. You don't have to have any experience working for a publication. Your man's had no fucking experience prior to hopping on a camera right in front of my face in the HQ. Built something from nothing, and that's what I want to help put a few of y'all on that have a passion behind these fantasy sports. Man, I'm thinking about expanding into esports, whether you cover esports as an industry or you want to be live streaming on the channel. I'm looking to create Big Dogs into a media company that publishes content around tons of different sports and personalities and authenticity and all of that kind of stuff. So if you are interested, there's way more info below in the link, which will be the first thing in my description. So if you want to apply for a position as a content creator for the Big Dogs brand, the link will be in the description, which will describe tons more about the actual position, what it entails, what you have to expect, as well as the actual application process. So thank you for your time. I really appreciate that. I want to really invest and grow this brand, and I want a few of you to be part of it, man. Even if it's like you think you and a friend would create your own awesome like video show, whether it's related to some of these fantasy sports or whatever, and you just want a platform, this is what I'm providing you with, basically. I'm providing you with a platform that can help build your personal brand, man. It's like you not having to start a YouTube channel from scratch. I want to put you on. I want to take you under the Big Dog's wing, and the future is yours, man. This is what it's all about right now. And that is all I wanted to say about that. So again, link will be the first thing in the description. I will make a personal video for this tomorrow that's only pertaining to the position and the application. But for now, thank you, and let's dive into the top waiver wire ads of this week. Okay, so as always, anyone mentioned in this video is owned in 55% or less of Yahoo leagues, so I'm not giving you out all the obvious names. And as we go through, obviously the trade deadline is today. I believe the trade deadline is 4 p.m. Eastern time, and there might be some breaking news as we're filming this, because I'm filming this on Tuesday. It's about 10 a.m. So by the time you watch this, the trade deadline might have already passed, and we might have seen some trades, so just bear with me as I break down my analysis Anyways, we will start position by position with the quarterbacks. Of course, first on the list is Derek Carr, owned in 26% of leagues, and the order of these players is not based on who I like the most. This is based on the percentage owned in leagues. So the most popularly owned player in Yahoo leagues going down the list. If you want to see the ownership as well as the next 3 matchups and the suggested FAAB spend I would use on any of these individual players, you could check out the full blog post on BigDogsFantasy.com. Check out the blog section, and you could see all of these in blog form. So we have Derek Carr. There's a lot of nonsense surrounding the Raiders as of late, and deservedly so. We had Derek Carr. He's crying on the football field. Yada, yada, yada. It doesn't make you any less of a man. I want to see some of y'all take fucking hits from a 375-pound person who just broke your finger. Like, honestly, Derek Carr, huge bounce bike week for him. 21 for 28, 244 passing yards, 3 touchdowns. They still took the L because Andrew Luck and this offense have been fucking lights out. But he also added a 4th score with his legs. So a big fantasy day out of Derek Carr. And at one point, he actually completed 17 passes in a row, and that's not something we haven't seen from him out of this year. He's gotten very hot, and he's become efficient at times. But he's also, of course, had a low floor, and he's had his fair share of bad fantasy days. But Yamans was very hot in this one. He's coming off 2 unusable fantasy games prior to this one, which makes me nervous because you can't expect this type of performance, week in and week out. But he has another very exploitable matchup at San Francisco in Week 9. And since it's in San Francisco, Oakland, San Francisco, very close to each other. It's almost a home game, I think. I'm pretty sure the stadiums are probably not that far apart. So if someone who lives out in San Fran or Cali wants to drop a comment down below and kind of fact check me on that, I am pretty sure because I was out in San Francisco and I think they're relatively very close. So it's almost not even an away game, although it is on the schedule. So that's obviously an upgrade for him. And then you're looking at a defense in San Francisco that's allowed multiple passing touchdowns to quarterbacks in 3 straight games. They just left Week 8 with injuries to Reuben Foster and Jaquiski Tart. I think that's pronounced correctly, their safety. So 2 injuries to their starting defense. Richard Sherman is banged up already. So Carr should be usable in this one despite having not a lot of weapons to work with. I think, the use of Rashard and the use of Jared Cook is going to be fine. Even if, now, the thing is, like, when you lose a guy like Amari Cooper, yeah, it sucks that you're losing a number 1 weapon, technically, but that also means that you don't have a lot of stress to force the ball to him. So you might see him, become a little bit more efficient because he, in the same way that, Dak has obviously not been more efficient without Des Bryant, but I think that offense overall has taken a hit because the line and the lack of weapons altogether. But you'll see sometimes, like, the offense becomes a little more, like, free-flowing, and sometimes the quarterback play becomes better and more efficient because, in his head he doesn't have to say to himself, like, oh, I need to force 10 targets to Amari Cooper or else there's going to be media on me and he's going to get mad and the coaches, all that kind of stuff. So it's possible that Derek Carr actually stays somewhat efficient with the loss of Cooper and not having as many weapons as people think that he doesn't have. So he's at San Fran, then he's against the Chargers, then he's at Arizona. I wouldn't spend a lot on him, but if you need a streamer, he's not the worst option. Next up, I put CJ Beathard on this list, and I'm not sure about his injury status, actually. I know he hurt his wrist or his hand or some shit last game, and let me get a live update right now. No, okay, so there's nothing serious with his injury. He's only owned in 6% of leagues, and he'll be going up against the Raiders. So Derek Carr is traveling to San Fran. San Fran is obviously playing against this Raiders defense. Beathard, subbing in for Garoppolo, got off to like this sizzling hot start. He has cooled off quite a bit in recent weeks, but he will take on this Raiders pass defense who have allowed 20 or more fantasy points to 3 straight quarterbacks. And just as a real-world pass defense, the Raiders have been awful. They have no pass rush. They're allowing the single highest yards per attempt number to opposing quarterbacks, a 13-4 touchdown to interception ratio on the year, and a QB rating of 106.6, which is the 4th highest allowed to opposing quarterbacks in the NFL. Beathard gets Oakland at home and the Giants at home, who will be traveling cross-country. So he might be streamable in 2 straight weeks. Third on this list, and obviously you knew he was going to be on here, is Fitzmagic of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Also 6% owned. He is probably the number 1 waiver wire pickup in 2QB/Superflex leagues, depending on how desperate you are at other positions, which we'll get into. But Fitzmagic is bike. He has been announced the starter after Jameis Winston came back off his suspension and has been absolutely disgusting. 10 interceptions in 4 games, I believe it was, including some fumble losses, I think. And he was benched on Sunday in favor of Fitz, and now Fitz will be the starter against Carolina in Week 9. And this is a tweet from Scott Barrett. It says, in case you were wondering who's going to be starting for the Buccaneers in Week 9, here's a hint. And he posted this prior to Fitz being announced the starter. If you're joining us via the podcast, I have a chart up on the screen on YouTube, so I'd suggest you kind of hop over there and join us there because I put up visuals throughout videos. Either way, and if you are on YouTube, I would very, very much appreciate a thumbs up on the video if you enjoy any of the videos I put up and you find this stuff valuable. So basically, he's just listing the quarterbacks in the NFL in perspective of, I believe it's just the quarterback rating, and Fitz is number 1 in the NFL with a 119.3 quarterback rating. Winston all the way down there at 31, so he's just telling you that Winston has been fucking terrible. Ryan Fitzpatrick deserves this starting spot. It's interesting for one reason. I think a lot of people are going to get really hyped about Fitzpatrick. And I'm actually a little bit worried about Fitzpatrick because of the Week 9 matchup. Actually, yeah, the Week 9 matchup is tough. They travel to Carolina. And I put up a tweet yesterday. If you're not following me on Twitter, make sure you're doing that because I'm always putting out random stats that I think you guys will find valuable. Their defense is kind of two-sided depending on where they're playing. At home, the Carolina defense has allowed 12.8 fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks. That's not what you want in a streaming quarterback. And they have allowed a 5 to 8 touchdown interception ratio, which is not good for opposing quarterbacks. While they're on the road, they have allowed on average 21.7 fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks. So when they're on the road, they are not a good defense. And they're very friendly to opposing quarterbacks. However, when they're at home, which they will be in Week 9, Fitzpatrick might struggle a little bit. He might have a tough time here. That's all I'm saying. You know, he will still be with a very good group of weapons, and he still, you know, looked very good in the beginning of the year. So it's possible that he kind of overcomes this. Looking back on his, like, crazy stretch in the beginning of the year, I mean, his matchups were against, I think, Pittsburgh, New Orleans, and Kansas City. So when you look back in retrospect, I mean, he couldn't have had 3 defenses, which he couldn't have had a better schedule in order to put up these passing numbers that he did. So I'm not like, I don't want to take anything away from Fitz, but I think the hype might be a little bit too high, especially for this Week 9 game. So if you're looking for a streaming option, yes, he's going to be there, but he probably will be ranked around like quarterback 15, 13 to 15 if I had to say. I haven't done my rankings yet. 4th on this list is Brock Osweiler. Miami Dolphins, 4% owned, and this is definitely for the extremely desperate of y'all folks out there. If you need to stream Brock, you're probably kind of out of the playoffs already. And you probably won't even be watching this video, so this might not be relevant. But the 5 people that this is relevant to, here's what's going on. We actually don't know what's going on with Ryan Tannehill. He has been out for a few games now, and we have no idea when he is going to be back. It is not going to be in Week 9, which means Osweiler, who has been shockingly okay in Tannehill's absence, especially from a fantasy football perspective, will continue to fill in. And he's been very usable in fantasy when they're playing in Miami at home, which they will be in Week 9 against a very banged up New York Jets secondary. The Jets secondary has allowed quarterbacks to throw for multiple touchdowns in 5 straight games. And in that 5-game span, they are allowing on average 305 passing yards a game to opposing quarterbacks. They've been absolutely shredded. So while I'm not excited about Brock Osweiler whatsoever, because we have a big enough sample size to know that he is #not good at football, the matchup certainly says at home that he could be a usable streamer for you. So I don't absolutely hate Brock. I would like to go elsewhere, but if you need to, do what you got to do. I ain't going to judge you over here. We are not judgmental. And that goes out for applying for my positions as well. I don't care who you are. I don't care where you're from. What you doing? I don't care if you black, white, yellow, purple, female, male, transgender, Trump supporter. Actually, that might be too far, but y'all get the point. Discrimination is not something we're going to do here at Big Dog. So anyone that thinks that they can provide quality content to the audience, man, I want you to get your name out there, and I want you to build yourself a platform and get the message across that you so desperately want to get across to the people, because they deserve the message that you want to bring to them. I don't know why I'm going off on these weird fucking tangents. But those are the 4 quarterbacks that I would suggest picking up if you are desperate. It was Derek Carr, CJ Beathard, Ryan Fitzpatrick, and Brock Osweiler. None of them I'm going crazy over. Fitz would be the one I really want if I'm in a Superflex league. Moving over to the running back position, we have Doug Martin of the Oakland Raiders, owned in 53% of leagues. So Doug Martin actually didn't look terrible on Sunday. I don't think he looked great. I know the numbers. He ran for 72 yards on 13 carries, which is 5.5 yards per carry. He had 2 catches for 17 yards. He lost a very costly fumble late in the game, and he didn't convert on either of his goal line carries. So it was kind of exactly how we imagined this going in this backfield, right? We have Doug Martin, who would be the primary runner, and we have Jalen Richard, who would be the primary pass catcher. And Jalen Richard did just that. He hauled in a team-high 8 of 8 targets, which was a 28.5% team target share. Very, very, very high number, especially for a running back. Martin did outsnap Richard 28-22. While Martin looked okay, and he might be usable just based on the volume, right? I expect him to get 15 or so touches going forward. The thing is, like, there will be, the majority of games are going to be somewhere from 12 to 15 touches and probably from 50 to 80 yards, depending on how efficient he's going to be. He will not be that involved in the passing game, and I'm worried about how many scoring opportunities he's going to have. So he's way more of a desperate play to me than a lot of people probably think of Doug Martin at this point, because I think he's going to give you a lot of 6 to 9 fantasy point performances going forward, and that's not exactly what you want at one of your RB positions. So I would probably spend somewhere between $5 and $10, depending on how desperate you are, but I wouldn't go crazy on him. He's at San Francisco next game, so that's a good matchup. Chargers at home, and then Arizona on the road, which is another good matchup. So pretty good matchups going forward. Second on this list is Peyton Barbour, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He is 46% owned, and he is definitely the top running back on waiver wires this week if he is available in your league. I'm pretty sure a lot of people were telling me that this was the Ronald Jones breakout week. As far as I'm concerned, it was supposed to be Ronald Jones' breakout week, and he was going to turn into a feature back, and he was going to run away with the Rookie of the Year award. I'm just fucking with you. No, literally no one said that. But, Rojo actually got hurt in this game. He pulled a hamstring or whatever, and he is expected to miss multiple weeks going forward, so he is pretty much out of the picture. And while you can't predict injuries, so I'm not going to sit here and be like, yeah, I predicted that, you can predict bad play, and that is literally the only thing you've gotten out of Ronald Jones thus far into the season, so you couldn't have really expected him to be that good. Now, we have just Payton Barbour and Jacquizz Rodgers left in this backfield, and I expect Payton Barbour to get the large majority of touches going forward. He dominated the touches in this one after Ronald Jones left. He carried the ball 19 times for 85 yards and a touchdown, and after failing to score in the first 4 games of the season, Payton Barbour for the Buccaneers, he has now scored in 2 of 3 games, and he will continue to operate as a lead back. Now, that was a problem, right? In the summer, we were like, yep, Payton Barbour is a clear lead back. He's going to get a lot of opportunities, a good offense, a lot of scoring opportunities. However, this team was scoring so much through the air and like 30, 50, 70-yard touchdowns, he didn't get scoring opportunities. Now, that regression has finally hit to the point where this offense is not putting up 45 points a game on 3 50-plus yard passing touchdowns. He is finally getting some scoring opportunities. And the fact that he's getting 18 to 20 touches a game means he's going to be giving you low RB2 value going forward. And a lot of people are probably desperate at running back right now. So Barbour is absolutely a pretty good add. His lack of involvement in the passing game definitely concerns me a little bit. However, Rojo out means that it's only going to be Rodgers and him working in this offense. So I would expect like his ceiling and his floor kind of gets a little bit of boost in that sense. So they're going on the road at Carolina, as I said, for Fitz. It's not a great matchup for him, but because of the volume is there, he's almost like a rich man's Doug Martin in the sense where he's going to be the lead back, the primary ball carrier. But he's in a better offense with more scoring opportunities. So I like him a lot more than Doug Martin going forward. I would probably spend between $8 and $13-14 on Barber if he is available. Maybe even more if you're really desperate for a running back. Third on this list is Ito Smith of the Falcons, 37% owned. And I want to say before this, listen, this is a perfect example of recency bias and small sample size. The week before this, Ito Smith was arguably the hottest waiver wire pickup at the running back position. Everyone was really, really, really excited for Ito Smith because he had scored a touchdown in 3 straight weeks prior to their Week 7 matchup, right? They had a bye in Week 8. But prior to the Week 7 matchup, he had 3 straight touchdowns, 3 straight weeks, failed to score in week 7. Therefore, he gave you a horrible fantasy output. It was like 45 total yards, no score. So everyone was like, oh my God, I'm going to drop him now, right? He went from the most popular waiver wire ad, immediately dropped. The thing is, like, his outlook is exactly the same going forward from week 9 for the rest of the season as it was prior to week 7 when he didn't score. So if you were excited about him in week 7 into week 8, there should be no difference about your excitement level. I understand he didn't score, but if you had only based your excitement on his scoring opportunities and his scoring production, then you're an idiot, to be honest with you, because touchdown production is extremely volatile. You should not, in redraft, volume is key. The only thing we can predict is volume, and volatility in terms of touchdown scoring is not something we can predict. So the fact that he was only putting up good fantasy days because of his touchdown production should have told you that not that he's a red flag or that he wasn't a good ad, but the hype around Smith, I think, was much higher than it needed to be. So what I would say, over the last 4 games, he's averaged 31 total yards and 9 touches. That is what you're getting with him. You are banking on him scoring. And it's not unreasonable considering he has led the Falcons in red zone touches this year. That's something else I tweeted out. He had almost doubled. He had more red zone touches than Coleman and Freeman combined leading up to week 7, and I'm pretty sure he still did after week 7. He's a low-end RB3 with flex value, with some upside. He's also the handcuff to Coleman, so that is what I would give him as a rest of the season outlook. I wouldn't get too excited about him. They're at Washington, then at Cleveland, and then home against Dallas, so not a great lineup of matchups either. 4th guy on this list is Elijah McGuire of the New York Jets, 6% owned. Powell is out for the year. McGuire is eligible to return in week 9. Apparently, he's been on the IR since the summer, and apparently he's healthy, and he should be ready to go. As long as he is in shape, and they do, in fact, make him eligible to return for week 9, I would imagine he gets a pretty prominent role in this backfield as, the pass-catching back, because in preseason, a lot of the beat reporters were saying, even when Powell was competing in the backfield, that McGuire was probably going to handle the majority of third down work in this offense. So the pass-catching back in the Jets offense, I think, definitely has value, and we've seen games where that third down back has, been really good in PPR format. So, My concern with McGuire, though, I picked him up in a couple leagues. My concern with McGuire, and similar to my concern with like 50% of the NFL backfields, is in fantasy, it's nearly impossible to know which of these backs in these running back by committees are startable on a week-over-week basis, because these things are so volatile in terms of, who's the game script and who is going to be more involved and the hot hand, and you're never going to be able to predict that stuff. So outside of like the top tier backfields like the Patriots and the Saints and whatever. Excuse me. Woo! Outside of those like top tier backfields, it's hard to start multiple running backs, let alone one with any sort of confidence. So I think he's a good ad in PPR leagues for the second half of the year. That being said, Crowell is still going to be very much involved, and it might be tough to figure out, week over week how much McGuire is really going to be used. But he's definitely a pretty good stash for now. They play Miami, who is a horrible run defense, and then they are against Buffalo at home in week 10. So he's got some good matchups. Hopefully he does get activated this week, and we could see him get a little bit of game action. So I like McGuire as a stash. Another guy I like as a stash, another young running back I like as a stash, is Josh Adams of the Eagles, only 1% owned. Same thing with this backfield, though. Josh Adams very well could be the best running back in this backfield. But this is always going to be a running back by committee in Philadelphia under Doug Peterson. That's how he has always coached, and I believe that that's what we've seen in this year. Even with Ajayi, that's what we are going to see continuing going forward. So I think he does deserve more run after last week's game where he looked very good, right? 9 rushes, 61 yards, 6.7 yards per carry. Given the fact that Wendell Smallwood and Corey Clement have done next to nothing on the ground, Josh Adams should continue to get fed on the ground, and it should mean the workload increasing week over week. But that doesn't mean it's going to happen. This very well might be a hot hand approach. Like next week, it wouldn't surprise me. They're on a bye, which is also another negative for Josh Adams right now. They're on a bye, and in the following week, they take on Dallas. Like, it would not surprise me if Josh Adams gets 7 carries for 37 yards. Clement gets 6 carries, and Smallwood gets 7 carries also. And then all of a sudden, you're looking at like, oh, they're all like fucking worthless. You know what I mean? So that's like the most probable outcome, that you're not going to be able to predict who to start on a week-to-week basis, which is why I don't put a lot of ownership into these guys. They are stashes. They are guys that if you are desperate or if you have room on your wire, if you have, if I own Corey Clement, I would drop him for Josh Adams, because at this point Clement has shown us nothing and Adams has shown at least more upside, or at least he has like the mystery factor where it's a possibility he breaks out over the second half of the year. So if there's guys that like you're not going to use in your lineup and if you want to grab Josh Adams for some upside, perfectly fine with that. But I'm not going to go crazy over guys like Josh Adams or Elijah McGuire. If I had to pick of those two, I would actually probably go with Elijah McGuire over Josh Adams, just because I liked what McGuire showed last year in his rookie year. So that's going to wrap up the running backs on this list, and we shall move over to the wide receivers. This is going to be the most interesting section of the waiver. This might be the most interesting section of waiver wire videos of the entire year because of the trade deadline. There is going to be a lot of movement on the waiver wires tomorrow, depending on who gets moved today, because there's been so many rumors. Before we get into that, though, I want to let you know that I am on Patreon, which is a platform where I put out exclusive content, my weekly rankings, a master stat sheet, which has almost every fantasy football stat imaginable, all in one stat sheet for you to organize and filter and look at things however you want to. So yeah, I do my weekly rankings on there. I do a private live stream for only my Patreons, which I basically answer all of your trade questions, your sit-start questions, whatever you got for me. It's personalized towards you. So that is just another opportunity for you to get more fantasy football info, content, access, exclusivity to your mans. Patreon.com/BDGE is where you could find that. Any support is very, very much appreciated, as well as like a thumbs up on this video, man. Just lets me know that you appreciate the videos, lets me know that I should keep making them. So if you are watching this and you found value so far, would very much appreciate you just scrolling down a little bit, just 2 seconds out of your day, hit that thumbs up button. If you're on the podcast, a rating and review would be gorgeous. Love that. Thank you very much. And let's get back to the video. Wide receivers. Now, I want to talk about the trading possibilities here. First up, let's talk about Courtland Sutton, right? We've heard a lot of rumors about Demaryius Thomas possibly being moved to the Patriots. I'm not going to get into their possible trade destinations. Maybe tomorrow I will do a recap if there are a lot of major moves that happen. But a report did just come out that Denver Sevens is, I guess it's a news channel, Troy Renck believes it is more likely Demaryius Thomas is traded on Tuesday than not. Broncos are looking for a third-round pick, which seems unlikely. Yeah, I highly doubt they're going to get a third-round pick for Demaryius Thomas. Thomas is owed $14 million in 2019, the final year of his contract. I believe they can get off of that without paying him that much. But what would happen, obviously, is that if Demaryius Thomas is moved, Courtland Sutton, who has already been playing just about as much as Demaryius Thomas is, and has been producing at pretty much the same level or at a higher level than Demaryius Thomas, would become the wide receiver 2 next to Emmanuel Sanders, and that would be a huge boost for Sutton's fantasy outlook. The smart move, and I've kind of been pointing at this in my previous waiver wire videos, would have been to pick up Courtland Sutton this weekend or last waiver wire, so that you've been sitting him hoping that Demaryius Thomas gets moved. If you did that, you're probably sitting pretty, and if it doesn't happen, DT doesn't get moved, you can just drop him. Not a big deal. Courtland Sutton is only owned in 10% of Yahoo leagues right now, so he's widely available. Now, if DT gets moved, Courtland Sutton is going to be a full-time player there, and he's going to get a huge amount of targets, because this is an offense historically that's always just funneled through their top 2 wide receivers. With Courtland Sutton, he was the exception, because now he's getting targets, and that's only because he is so good. And they see Courtland Sutton as he's basically like the same thing as Demaryius Thomas, and a better version of him at this point in his career. He's big, he's fast, he is a good playmaker down the field. And I think if DT gets moved, that moves Courtland Sutton into... I want to see more of Sutton in game, in game as a full-time player and actually producing rather than all this like theoretical hype before I really label him as like a wide receiver 2 with upside. I would label him more of a wide receiver 3, but still he's going to be very startable week over week in flex or as your wide receiver 3 if DT gets moved. So Courtland Sutton would be... it's going to be very close because of the next guy, but Courtland Sutton would probably be my number 1 waiver wire pickup this week if DT gets moved, and I would spend... if you are wide receiver needy, I think I don't think there's really any limit to Sutton here. I think 25, 35%, 50% if you're really trying to gamble a little bit. Like, I think Sutton's a very good pickup. Chris Godwin, 53% owned. He's the other guy. There's also one other guy after this, but Chris Godwin is another guy that I highly recommend you try to scoop this week, and it's for 2 reasons. One, because we've seen the rumors about Deshaun Jackson getting moved. If I had to guess, I don't think that's going to happen. The other thing is Mike Evans hurt his leg at the end of the game last week. So Mike Evans could very possibly miss some time going forward. If that's the case, Godwin has always performed when one of these two wide receivers has missed time. Whether it's Evans, whether it's Deshaun Jackson. If Deshaun Jackson misses time, I think that's even better for Godwin because he takes over that more voluminous role. If Deshaun Jackson misses time, then Mike Evans will still be the number one target in this offense, but Chris Godwin will, his volume will still go up pretty significantly. So I absolutely love Chris Godwin because he's got two outs, right? He's got either Mike Evans hurt or Deshaun Jackson getting traded. With Fitzpatrick coming in, hopefully this offense runs a little smoother. So Chris Godwin is definitely a guy I am trying to snag on my waiver wires this week. The third guy is kind of interesting. Kendrick Bourne, 0% owned, San Francisco. This is on the back of these Pierre Garçon trade rumors. If he does move, Kendrick Bourne will take over as a slot receiver, and that's what we saw in Week 8 with Pierre Garçon sidelined due to an injury. Kendrick Bourne came in and saw 10 targets, caught 7 of them, so he was a really good PPR play in San Francisco. They have a banged-up receiving core, and I think that Kendrick Bourne would be a sneaky PPR play here. So if Garçon gets moved, that is the play. Kendrick Bourne is the play here as the slot receiver. Not going to go crazy about him, but in a PPR stash, you could definitely do worse. But let's get to the other wide receivers on this list that really don't have any involvement with what happens in the trade sequence today. But before we get into that, I want to thank today's sponsors for the video, FantasyJocks.com. As y'all know, they always hook your mans up. They are the industry leader in fantasy football gear for your league. Doesn't have to be fantasy football. They have stuff for fantasy basketball, fantasy baseball, fantasy NASCAR. As I mentioned before, they got it all, man. They have belts, they have trophies, they have rings. Get your champion a goddamn ring. Respect. Put some respect on your champs' names. You can have your last 5 champions' names engraved on the belt so you got a history of your league. It makes the league that much better. It makes the game much more enjoyable, much more fun playing for some shit on the line. This stuff is extremely high quality from Fantasy Jocks. This is the stuff I've been using in all my leagues for 5 or so years now. Not just because I work with them and they sponsor and they partner the videos. They are legit. They are the GOAT. The fantasy GOAT. Check them out at FantasyJocks.com. Link will be in the description. You can use promo code TAKE10 or Taco Corp for 10% off your order, which means all y'all got to do is have your league mates throw in $5, $7, $8 a piece, and you can get something for your league. FantasyJocks.com. Thank you for sponsoring today's video. Tre'Quan Smith of the New Orleans Saints, 31% owned, and I know this is actually going to be an easy pickup for a lot of you guys because people are going to be off of him following his down game in Week 8. He did next to nothing, but that's going to happen when Drew Brees throws for 120 yards, guys. And thinking about it, Smith had 4 targets in this game, so 4 targets on 22 pass attempts by Brees, not a terrible thing. That's over an 18% target share. And if you're getting 18% of the targets in a Drew Brees offense, you're probably going to put up some pretty good numbers. And at least you have a pretty high ceiling on a weekly basis with Smith getting a lot of the long balls that Ted Ginn might have gotten. So, you know, we're not going to see a game like this out of Brees again where he throws for 120 passing yards. Smith is clearly the wide receiver 2 here, still far ahead of Meredith. Meredith ran like 7 routes in last game or something like that, and he's been doing absolutely nothing. So Smith is the wide receiver 2 to own in this offense behind Thomas. He has much better days ahead of him, and I would spend $3 to $7 on the waiver wire if you're looking for a wide receiver. They get the Rams, they're at Cincinnati, then home against Philadelphia, so 3+ matchups where I think Smith can produce as long as his offense starts rolling again. Second up on this list is another young wide receiver, another rookie. And that is Christian Kirk of the Arizona Cardinals, 30% owned now with new offensive coordinator Byron Leftwich taking over, made his debut. Shouts out to Byron Leftwich. I hope he keeps his offense rolling a little bit. They didn't look fantastic, but it's definitely an improvement upon literally the woat Mike McCoy. Basically promised to get Larry Fitzgerald much more involved in this offense, and he did just that. Fitzgerald ended up finishing with like a team-high 12 targets. I think it was a season high for him. 102 yards and a touchdown. And it was easily his best game of the year. And Fitz is clearly going to be involved in this offense pretty heavily moving forward. Doesn't mean Kirk is going to be phased out. Kirk had another quietly good fantasy game, man. And he has been doing so for the last month consistently since Rosen's taken over as a quarterback for this team. The rookie has he did catch 3 of 7 targets in this one for 42 yards and the game-winning touchdown in the fourth quarter. It's the 3rd straight game with 7 targets for Christian Kirk. And what might be more encouraging is Josh Rosen's 40 passing attempts in this game, which is a season and technically a career high for Rosen since he's a rookie. So it's good that he's letting Rosen, sling the ball and kind of unleash it. And that's going to be an upgrade for all the pass catchers, of course. Now, McCoy, Byron Leftwich may be looking to, open up the offense more going forward. And that's something that they had a problem with, from weeks 1 to 8 or 1 to 7. Now, they do have a bye in week 9, but after the week 9 bye, they get 2 favorable matchups. They're at Kansas City, at Arrowhead, where they're obviously going to need to pass the ball a lot, and they're going to be home versus a terrible Oakland pass defense. So I think Kirk, after the bye, continues to roll, as well as this offense kind of gets better and better as the year progresses under Leftwich. Number 3 on this list is Kiki QT. Man, the rookie wide receivers are dominating this list. The next one's a rookie wide receiver. So is the 1-2 after that. Okay, let's do it, baby. Kiki QT, 20% owned, and Will Fuller is officially out with a torn ACL for the remainder of the year, which means QT is a must-add in every league. QT would be my top pickup behind Courtland Sutton if DT gets traded, and Chris Godwin if Evans is hurt or Djax gets traded. He instantly becomes the second option in this passing offense behind DeAndre Hopkins. With a Deshaun Watson who was looking better. He's getting healthier going forward, and that should be good for QT. Now, QT is also recovering from a hamstring injury of his own that cost him last week's game. And they played Denver. They're at Denver in week 9, which is a really tough matchup for QT, who's the slot receiver here, because he will be going against Chris Harris, who's one of the top all-around cornerbacks, not just slot cornerbacks in the NFL right now. So what I would love for Denver to do as a QT fantasy owner in multiple leagues is for them to rest him in week 9. Then they get their bye in week 10. So we'll have 2 weeks or now 3 weeks to get completely healthy. And then he'll keep on rolling. So without Fuller, we've seen QT be very involved in this offense. And I think he's going to be a really, really, really solid add down the stretch for you and someone you could fill in like as a comfortable wide receiver 3 with upside in PPR league. He's someone I absolutely love going forward. And I would probably spend $10 to $15 if you need a wide receiver. Another guy that I would really like to add on my team is DJ Moore of the Carolina Panthers, only 15% owned. First round rookie pick from Carolina, has yet to really come out of his shell, but he did so in week 8. Had his breakout game against a tough Baltimore secondary. He caught 5 passes for 90 yards, added 39 rushing yards on the ground, so 129 total yards in this one. Now, following Carolina's week 4 bye, Moore has become more and more involved in this offense, and that is what you want to see, in terms of predicting whether or not his role is going to grow and whether or not his production is going to be an uptick in fantasy football, So he saw a total of 4 targets in the team's first 3 games, from weeks 1 to 3. Following Sunday's game, right, his week 8 game, he has seen at least 4 targets in every game since their bye week. So 1 to 3, he saw a total of 4 targets. Bye week in week 4, from 5 to 8, he has seen at least 4 targets in every game. Since then, he is averaging 5 targets a game, and he has double-digit PPR fantasy points in 3 of those 4 games. So he's actually not just seeing like a decent amount of volume, but he's actually putting up production as well. Now, his usage was obviously bumped by the fact that Torrey Smith was sidelined in this game, and the head coach came out and said that DJ Moore is going to see a much more expanded role in this one, and he did. Smith didn't practice at all in days leading up to week 8. So it's very possible that his week 9 status is in the air and less than 50-50 because you want to see him get in multiple limited practices, if not a full practice before suiting up. So it's possible Smith sits again. If he does so, Moore will be he's coming off a season high 71% of the snaps, and that has only room to grow here. If Smith is out, I would expect that to be up to like 80-85%. Shit's looking juicy out there for DJ Moore and this Panthers offense because they play the Tampa Bay defense. And Tampa Bay defense is basically putting on a clinic on how not to be a defense. So this matchup is a ridiculously good one for Moore. If Smith sits, Moore is going to be a high-end wide receiver 3 with a lot of upside in week 9. Then they're at Pitt and then at Detroit. All matchups that are pretty good. So Moore is another guy I want. Next one on this list is Devante Parker of the Miami Dolphins, 13% owned. I don't want to be the one to say it, but it looks like Devante Parker is officially bike. Well, at least his hype is bike. The hype bike. HYPEBYKE. Hype bike. Parker set a new career high on Thursday Night Football with 134 receiving yards. Caught 6 of 9 targets, one of which was not fucking aimed at him. That ridiculous play, which was a ricochet, which shouldn't have even had a career high in receiving yards. But we gonna pretend we're box score warriors right now when it comes to Devante Parker, because I'm trying to hype him up, trying to sell him a little bit, because the thumbnail had to include Devante Parker, because the new thumbnails I do now, I need to go on Google and I need to find a transparent image of a player, and he was the only one who had like a vertical transparent image on Google, so I had to use him. I'm like, damn, now I gotta hype him up because I don't want to put someone in my thumbnail who I don't even like. I don't really like Devante Parker, but he's in my thumbnail. So he had a ball-and-ass game. We're gonna put it at that, right? Devante Parker, 24.3% of the targets in this one, and this was almost entirely due to the entire like Miami wide receiver group being dead, right? Kenny Stills is dealing with a groin injury, missed week 8. Albert Wilson is on the IR. Rest in peace. That left Devante Parker battling for targets with, the bite-sized Danny Amendola and Jakeem Grant. Prior to this, Parker has missed almost all of the Dolphins games with a mix of injuries and just healthy scratches. So he's been an absolute non-factor in fantasy football up to this point. But they need someone on the outside, and Parker, as the kids say, is it, Chief. You know what I mean? Parker's there. Parker's the only big guy they got on this offense right now. Maybe it was the talk of his agent criticizing Adam Gase. Maybe it was just the fact that he was getting benched and they weren't playing him at all. But Parker was hyped for this game and he came out balling, man. And Stills was quickly ruled out for Thursday Night Football, which means that his Week 10 status is absolutely up in the air. Groin is a tricky injury to deal with. Now, if he sits again, Parker will be in a great matchup against a banged-up Jets secondary. Like DJ Moore, I think he is a high-end wide receiver 3 with upside in Week 9. Next up on this list, and you know I absolutely love this MF, Anthony Miller of the Chicago Bears. Rookie wide receiver, second-round pick who they traded up for, 9% owned in leagues. Now, with Allen Robinson sidelined, fantasy owners expected a big game out of Taylor Fraudbreel. That's what we're going to call him on this channel. AKA Taylor Gabriel, huge fraud. But the God, Anthony Miller, was the one who showed up on Sunday. He led the team in targets with 7, which gives him 7 targets in bite-to-bite games now. Miller's getting a little involved in the offense. He ran 63% of his snaps from the slot on Sunday, and he was targeted on nearly 32% of the routes he ran from this slot, which is great news as Trubisky offenses usually do funnel through over-the-middle type passes. Now, the problem this year has not been Anthony Miller, man. It has been Trubisky throwing the ball. Miller should have had another 3 touchdowns and probably like 200 more yards on his stat line had it not been for awful overthrows from Mitch Trubisky. Trubisky's been a great fantasy quarterback. I am not debating that, but it's similar to Blake Bortles like a couple of years ago where he's putting up a lot of these garbage fantasy points through rushing yards and like fluky deep passes and shit like that. Trubisky, he's just not good at throwing the ball. He ranks 32nd in the NFL in adjusted completion percentages among quarterbacks. He has PFF's 33rd worst quarterback passing grade, which is ahead of only Ryan Tannehill, Josh Allen, and Tyrod Taylor. Now, if Allen Robinson misses Week 9, I really like Anthony Miller as a sneaky play here against the Bills. Not only if you're desperate at wide receiver in season-long leagues, but as a DFS play too. Because Tre'Davious White, who is a very, very, very good cornerback, will take away the opponent's top outside receiver, and that is Taylor Gabriel. Taylor Gabriel runs 95% of his routes on the outside. He does not go into the slot. That is where Anthony Miller will be playing. So Tre'Davious White likely on Taylor Gabriel. We're going to see Anthony Miller probably run wild in the slot. And we saw, James White take advantage of these short passes last night on Monday Night Football, as well as Julian Edelman had a big game. Of course, that was a situation because I had Tom Brady in one league going against James White and Julian Edelman in a half PPR league. And by the first quarter, they had like a combined 17 catches for like 41 yards. So that's literally the worst thing that could have happened as a Tom Brady owner in that situation. But that's neither here nor here. If Allen Robinson misses another game, which he very well might do because he was a downgrade midweek last week and missed the game, I think he's a good play against Buffalo in Week 9. Last on this list is a guy who really intrigues me, man. And I don't really know what to make of him. And this is David Moore of the Seattle Seahawks, 3% owned. So who is David Moore? He is a second-year, 7th-round pick out of East Central University. And he's been making some real noise in Seattle, man. He has overtaken Brandon Marshall on this depth chart. And I want you to take a look at his profile on Player Profiler. 6'1", 220. Very good size. 4.48 40-yard dash for someone that big puts him in the 89th percentile of spark score, 66th percentile burst score, which gives him a 95th percentile spark score, y'all. College yards per reception, 15.4. And what Matt Kelly, the Roto Underworld podfather, as he is self-proclaimed, who is the creator of PlayerProfiler.com, says the two most telling attributes about whether or not a wide receiver fantasy prospect is going to emerge, or if he has the upside of emerging as a really good fantasy prospect, is the college dominator rating and the breakout age. And as you can see here, he is above the 74th percentile in both of those categories. College dominator just means the percentage of production that you had in college of your team's overall receptions, receiving yards, and touchdowns. So it's basically telling you that you are hashtag good at football, right? You produced at a college level. The problem with a lot of players who look at like spark scores and size, speed adjusted things is that they look at these metrics and they're like, oh, he has so much potential. However, he has never shown that he's actually good at football. That's a problem with a lot of NFL scouts. They like to take guys who, like Christine Michaels. Those are the guys who have never actually done anything in terms of production, but since their speed score size is so good, people are like, oh, he's got the potential. You don't have the potential just because you look like you should have the potential. You have the potential because you are good at football and you are also athletic. David Moore is a guy who has both of those, and he broke out at a very young age. On Sunday, Moore caught all 4 of his targets for 97 yards and a touchdown. This is his 3rd straight week now scoring a touchdown. He has 4 receiving touchdowns over the previous 3 weeks. Coming off their bye, he played on 45 snaps, which was his 2nd highest total of the season, just 4 fewer than Tyler Lockett, 9 fewer than Doug Baldwin. Over the last 3 weeks, he leads Seattle wide receivers in yards and touchdowns. He is tied with Doug Baldwin in receptions with 1 fewer target. He has the highest average depth of target with 19.5 yards on the team. He is averaging 20.2 yards per reception, which is 8th in the NFL with any wide receiver more than 10 targets, and has the 10th highest yards per route run in the NFL during that span, man. He's converted all 3 of his red zone targets into touchdowns this year. Russell Wilson is starting to heat up in the passing game. I think Moore's rest of the season outlook is on the rise. Is it possible he does not become a thing? Yes, very possible. This is more of a stash. But just looking at some of the game film here, man, you can see David Moore is someone that Player Profiler compared to Michael Floyd. Someone that could run the deep routes. He has good size, really good, strong hands. Goes up and gets the ball in the air, and he can fight it away from defenders. He runs good routes, very good at contested catches. He kind of reminds me of a Marvin Jones. He looks a little thicker than Marvin Jones, but he reminds me of a guy who can make the plays of Marvin Jones, and you're seeing it here. Good concentration, snatching the ball out of defenders' hands, making plays down the field, and that's what you look for someone that might have a second half splash down the stretch for the fantasy season. Okay, I know that was a long section, but bear with me. We have the tight ends and the defensive streamers of the week left. Only a couple of them. So we have Vance McDonald of the Pittsburgh Steelers, owned in 48% of the leagues. Now, McDonald didn't give you a great game on Sunday, but it wasn't awful. He caught all 3 of his targets for 47 yards. And I think that's the floor that he gives you on the Steelers offense pretty much. Now, the Steelers travel to Baltimore in Week 9 to take on the Ravens pass defense, who, if they have a weak spot at defending, it is at the tight end position, at least over the recent weeks. So Greg Olsen just went 4 for 56 and a touchdown against them last week. 2 weeks ago, we look at the Saints tight ends who went 8 for 88 and a touchdown. And then 2 weeks prior to that, we have the Browns tight ends, Njoku, Seth Evolve, but mainly Njoku's production, but they combined for 7 for 95. So they've given up a lot of production to the tight end position in fantasy over the recent weeks. After the Ravens, McDonald and the Steelers get Carolina, and Carolina has been awful against tight ends this year. They have given up the 2nd most fantasy points to the tight end position on the year. So Vance McDonald is one of my top waiver wire pickups at the tight end position, only if you cannot get this guy, Jack Doyle of the Indianapolis Colts. 25% owned. He is highly available, and y'all, he was someone that I hyped up a ton in preseason, and he was like one of my favorite tight ends coming into the year, and I got called out a lot for this, man, because of the lack of production over the first couple games. But he is so bike! Jack Doyle bike, baby. Jack Doyle missed weeks 3 through 7, giving way to Eric Ebron to dominate snaps and produce as an elite fantasy tight end. Not denying that. Doyle is back, though. He came back with a vengeance in week 8. He finished as Fantasy's tight end 4 on the week. He caught 6 of 7 targets for 70 yards and a touchdown. Check out this tweet from Graham Barfield. I was going to tweet out something similar to this, but he already pretty much put it into perspective, and I didn't want him. It didn't make sense recycling it. Said, with Jack Doyle hip back in the lineup in week 8, Ebron saw his snaps cut to 18% versus Oakland. Jack Doyle at 75%. In 3 games where Doyle has played this year, in weeks 1, 2, and 8, Ebron's snap rates are 45%, 26%, 18%. Doyle's out targeting Ebron 22-11. That's it right there. That is it, Chief. That is it, Chief. I don't know what more to tell you that Jack Doyle is the tight end to own in Indy. Does not mean Eric Ebron is not going to be usable, because he is going to be in there in the red zone. He has been a very good red zone tight end on the year. He scored a lot of touchdowns, and I don't expect that to stop because Luck loves using tight ends in the red zone. But Doyle is going to be the between the 20s guys, and that is something that has dominated this year in Indianapolis. Whether it was, Doyle in the beginning of the season, or Chester Rogers, Ryan Grant, whoever it has been super productive, especially in PPR leagues. And Doyle is going to get a ton of targets going forward. I would say he's going to be a 7 to 8 target a game guy. And given the way that this Colts offense is rolling and the number of touchdown passes Luck is throwing, Doyle has top 5 fantasy upside over the second half of the year. And he's someone that, if you're desperate at tight end and you don't need like a wide receiver or one of those guys that I mentioned prior, then Doyle would be my number 1 waiver wire pickup this week, and I would use my number 1 overall waiver wire pickup on him. They do have a bye-in this week, but then they get Jacksonville and Tennessee, both at home. They actually have like 3 or 4 home games in a row after the bye, which I think will really get this offense rolling. So I love me some Jack Doyle. Let me update the Twitter world and Roto world and see if we got any trade action going on. Doesn't look like it. Nope, nothing yet. This is 10:57 a.m. right now, so this probably won't be up till around noon for you guys Eastern time. So defensive special team streamers, man. I've been fucking money. If there's anything, if I've been wrong on everything this year, that is fine, because I've been so right on with my defensive streamers every single week. And guys, this is gold. I can't say anything more to you than these 3 things. These are what you look for when streaming a defense. The team favored to win the game by Vegas lines. Team is favored. There's no point in starting a fantasy defense that is not even favored to win the game. It is just fucking dumb. It's dumb. Don't do that. Favored to win the game at home with a low over-under total. A low over-under total. Understood? Those are the 3 things you look for. And I had like 4 fantasy suggestions that fit that criteria last week, and I'm pretty sure all 4 of them ended up as top 10 fantasy defenses. And Cincinnati was one of them. The Patriots were another one. And these are all 55% or less owned in Yahoo leagues. So these are streamers, legitimate streamers. And I think those 2 were probably the top 2 fantasy defenses on the week. So guys, I'm telling you, if you are in a trap, I don't care if you think that. The 4th criteria would be if you're trying to select between 2 and they're around the similar area in terms of those 3 criteria, I would prefer playing a defense or a team that's actually good at defense. You know what I mean? So rather than like playing the Colts defense, who were a good streamer this week, of course, or last week because they played the Bills, but like I'd rather not play them if I had the choice. So this week, there are 4 teams that I think fit that criteria and would be good streamers. First up on this list is the Denver Broncos versus the Houston Texans at home, 53% owned. They have a 2.5-point favorite over the Texans. The over-under total is 46, which isn't super low, but it's not high compared to the numbers that we've been seeing. Houston Texans are going to be without Will Fuller, so that loses a field stretcher. Kiki QT also might not be playing. We don't know. So I like the Broncos this week. That's a pretty good streamer. You also have the Carolina Panthers versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, 45% owned. 6.5-point favorite, so they're nearly a touchdown favorite. The over-under is 54, which is pretty high. So I'm probably going to stay away from the Panthers. But like I said, the Panthers play way better at home than they do on the road. I believe they average 8 fantasy points a game on the at home compared to like 4.7 on the road. So they're not a terrible streaming thing, especially if Mike Evans misses time and or Deshaun Jackson gets traded. They'll be without some of their top weapons, so I don't hate that either. My favorite, though, my favorite streaming defense this week by far is the Dallas Cowboys at home versus the Tennessee Titans. I want to pull up a tweet that I tweeted out yesterday if I could find it. First of all, they're 12% owned. They are... I'll just read the tweet. So The Cowboys defense averages 8.7 fantasy points a game at home versus 4 fantasy points per game on the road. In week 9, they will be healthy coming off their bye. They take on the Titans, who have been a terrible offense, at home as 6.5-point favorites with this week's lowest over-under total in the NFL, 41 points. So they are big favorites in a game that is not expected to score a lot of points, and the Cowboys have actually been a good real-life defense. 12% owned, which means they're available in 88% of your leagues, guys. If you need a streaming option, Dallas Cowboys would be my favorite one of week 9. Go get the Cowboys. Your man's told you so. They're on Monday Night Football. I like guys playing on Monday Night Football just because, you know, you got that comeback in you. And if you're down like 6 points, you get to kind of root on the team or whatever. Cowboys, grab them. The 4th team on this list, Miami Dolphins versus New York Jets. 11% owned. They are 3-point favorites at home. 45.5 over-under total, so a moderately low over-under total. They are favorites. They are at home. They are low-owned. They are against the Jets offense that has almost no fucking weapons. They were without Terrell Pryor. They were without Quincy Enunwa. They were without Bilal Powell. And Sam Darnold is very turnover-prone. Miami Dolphins have been bad as of late, but they were very good defense at the beginning of the year. I know they've kind of succumbed to a lot of injuries, and I don't know. I kind of like them in this game. So if you can't get the Cowboys, get one of these other 3 teams. And those are my favorite defensive streamers for the week. And you can also use those guys for your DFS plays as well if you don't want to pay up for the top defenses. And that's going to wrap up this video, guys. I know it was a long one. I really appreciate it if you stuck around for this because I put a lot of time and work into these videos. Of course, if you are interested in joining Big Dog's Gotta Eat as a content creator, man, I want to mentor you. I want to bring you on. I want you to build up as this platform builds up and we take off, man. If you want to join the squad, make sure you hit that first link in the description down below. Otherwise, I would very much appreciate a like from y'all. Comment down below if you have any questions or whatever. Subscribe to the channel if you're new, of course. We're doing videos all week. And if you're on the podcast, a rating and review would also be very much appreciated. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining me. I will see y'all on Thursday. We got a special video on Thursday. It's not going to be the normal trade targets or question and answer video. We're going to do some mid-season first round mock drafts redone. We're going to do some MVPs, mid-season MVPs and busts and whatnot. So it's going to be a good one on Thursday. Make sure you tune in for that one, and I'll see y'all then. Peace.